Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and Blizzard is doing more nerfs to corruptions, particularly addressing how some of the corruptions that are really strong are performing in PvP. But also overall some nerfs to some of the more deadly, but also powerful corruptions that people are, I guess you can't really say abusing since Blizzard are the ones that introduced them to the game, but let's just say have had very predictable but also very unfortunate consequences. So I'm going to be doing some of the updates on that, as well as some of the reward structures that you guys might find interesting on this Tuesday Wednesday reset, particularly dealing with some of the loot you might get from Mythic Plus dungeons. So now let's get on with the news. The first thing we will talk about is, first of all, massive amount of updates Blizzard is doing to some of the items. Of course, Blizzard is going to be buffing trinkets a lot more, by either reducing the cooldown, like a brand new PvP trinket. You also have the Humming Black Dragon Scale, which has a levitate effect, which a lot of people have been complaining. So something like a Neural Silencer or Magical Intrusion Dampener is going to take away that whole levitate effect. Also, other trinkets in the raid are being buffed because they simply are not too strong. Usually Blizzard overbuffs and makes some of the strongest trinkets in the game, particularly in Battle for Azeroth. But it looks like with this new raid, they really have been holding back, and now they're having to buff them further. We also got a couple updates to Echoing Void. Echoing Void can now only trigger from abilities that are on the global cooldown, which should massively reduce the amount of stacks you're able to build up. This is in place of it being able to build off of auto attacks and maybe even dot abilities, so only things that take a global, like applying your dots or shadow bolt on the enemy, or if you are a tank, you will need to go for a lot more shield slams and thunderstorms in order to get the most value out of Echoing Void. Also, Echoing Void can now be removed by abilities that dispel magic effects. So if you're a huge fan of being able to remove corruptions, Blizzard isn't going to remove them out of the game, but if you're a priest or a shaman, you can remove them off of your enemy. You also have a nerf to Twisted Appendages. It now has literally 1% of an enemy's health instead of 20%. So next time you are in arenas or a battleground and there's a tentacle firing mindflay at you, it is worth the time for you to turn around, target it, use a global in order to kill it, or maybe even an auto attack. But on the flip side, the AoE abilities like a mage's Arcane Explosion will not be as effective in terms of taking it out. You also had a funny thing where warriors were able to get something like a victory rush upon killing those things, so in PvP that was basically free healing. But wait, there's more. If you are a fan of PvP like arenas and not a fan of corruptions, especially those that have percentage health damage, as in a corruption will deal let's say 18% of your health as damage to the enemy, and it can crit, Blizzard decided to nerf a couple of those different corruptions. First of all, Twilight Devastation. This is a pretty big one. It has a 12-second cooldown now when engaged in combat with enemy players. So in a raid or a dungeon, that ability can fire off as many times as it wants to, although on a very, very low proc rate. But in PvP, it will particularly hold off for 12 seconds at least before firing again. And its damage in PvP has been reduced by 50%. So while Devastation does quite a bit of damage, it can crit up to like, what, 130k as a crit, and you can fire twice back to back, and it cleaves everything in front of you, so every enemy takes the same amount of damage. But we also have an update to Echoing Void, also 50% reduced damage when engaged with other enemies, and when you add that it can only stack on globals, far less stacks and far less damage that you might be able to see in PvP. Now this is probably not going to make any of those corruptions any much worse. Well, potentially could. I guess the numbers will tell us which corruptions are most consistent, but it looks like Blizzard is trying to balance them down so they're not really super game breaking. One thing I liked about these corruptions, and this is my personal opinion, is games got a lot faster. Whether it's a healer versus healer, double DPS, whatever comp you may run, with these corruptions doing as much damage as they do, healers were not surviving nearly as long. It was kind of cool to see the reaction time of some players, while others were a little bit slow to the reaction time to really figure out what was going on, and then bam, people got blown up. I thought it was kind of cool because the game I felt like has been kind of slowish. It isn't the slowest we've seen WoW PvP ever, but it is definitely on the slower end in my opinion. It's not a bad thing, it's a preference thing, and it was kind of cool to see the game kind of like fast forwarded very quickly where the damage is just really, really high, so the healing has to be a lot more reactive. But they are nerfed, so hopefully it should create some semblance of balance. If you're like me, there's a good chance you got a bunch of chests waiting for one or a couple different characters from Mythic Pluses. Blizzard decided to clarify a little bit about the upcoming resets and confirmed a bit more information. Now, when I'm reading the text, it says weekly chests for Mythic Keystone and PvP activities now contain Season 4 items which are always corrupted. I'm going to interrupt myself right there. Does that mean PvP chest, the Conquest Cap chest for the week? Is that what they mean by PvP activities, or do they mean more PvP world quests? Maybe the supply drops that drop from zones from time to time in war mode, or maybe it's from, I don't know, certain specific PvP activities that I'm not sure of, like, do faction assaults count? I mean, they don't really specify, so we're to guess that maybe the end of the week PvP chest is going to have a corruption, but no guarantee. But we do know the item levels of those rewards are going to go up to a maximum of 475 item level, so that means it's going to be pretty lucrative, and it's not going to be a Warforged or Titanforge system. That means if you do a really powerful, really difficult key in Mythic Plus, at the end of the week you'll get a guaranteed item level specific piece of gear. And the gear itself is going to be randomized, but the item level is going to be well earned, and I would guess the same thing for PvP as well. Blizzard also mentioned that all this gear is to be corrupted except for trinkets. I would imagine the amount of difficulty they would have balancing all these trinkets as well as corruption effects, and how some of them might be super lucrative that you just basically slot it in and there you go, you get something really best in slot. Or maybe it's because it's really difficult to balance corruption in terms of the power based on a trinket, because maybe they balance the item level and maybe the base stats of certain corruptions off of gear, but a trinket usually will have like agility or versatility or haste, so sometimes you'll just have a secondary stat with a proc, and maybe that would just be a nightmare for them to figure out how the corruption would affect. Of course, maybe they could have also made it just with the item level, but hey, if you want to look at it that way, it's one less item that you need to worry about with corruptions. And that's going to be everything we had to talk about for today. You guys let me know your thoughts in the comments below, but otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see all of you in another video.